Good morning, Rabbi Sai. Definitely think and hope today will be a bit shorter than other ones. There were some who suggested, who pointed out that it might be a good idea as Pesach approaches to talk about mechiras chametz and the history, the halachas. Now, the subject of mechiras chametz actually covers many details, and the way mechiras chametz developed had many stages. And a lot of people have covered this from different angles, and you can find it written up in different places. But I want to focus on one particular controversy that has to do with the history, the development of mechiras chametz. And although it is mentioned in a number of places, I didn't find that anyone was 100% medayek in getting the details and the order, the sequence of events exactly right. So in Romania, there's a city called Iasi. And we actually know that early on, the Alter Rebbe actually had hashpah there, had influence there. Chassidim. And that's its own topic, not relevant to this. And we know that the Abder Rav had influence on the Iasi and the Ruzhner, etc. At any rate, this story happened around the year Tafresh Gimel, so the 1840s, in the time of the Tzach Tzedek. Now, to understand where this fits in, so Bekitzer, the background is, we said there's stages in mechiras chametz. So, Bechlalos, where does it come from? We know there's a Tesefta. Everyone points to the Tesefta in Psachim that says that if you're on a ship, you can sell the chametz to Goy till after Pesach. It's often a Tesefta. From the Tesefta goes into Rambam. The Rambam cites this din, and Mefarshim say, Tesefta, until it ends up in Shulchan Aruch Hilchos Pesach. And by the time it gets to Shulchan Aruch, it already doesn't say anymore anything about a ship, because at the time of the Rishonim, you had some maybe who wanted to say that it's only in matzav like that. But in Shulchan Aruch, it just says you can sell it to a goy, michutz labayis is the lashon. As long as you do it right, as long as you give it to him. So it is clear, though, that originally you were supposed to hand the actual chametz over to the guy. At some point, as the Jewish commerce business developed in Eastern Europe, so we know that the Jews were very heavily involved in selling alcohol. And once you're dealing with large quantities of alcohol, so it's hard to somehow hand it all over to someone else. And maybe people just had a little chametz before Pesach. Here, it's a big hefsid to lose, and it's hard to move around. So that's where you start seeing the concept of we're going to leave it in the Yid's house, and we're going to set aside a room, and we're going to either sell the room or rent out the room. That itself, different people say different things. And that's when kinyan starts getting more complicated, because how exactly do you do a kinyan with a guy in this type of situation? You're not just handing it over to him. And that's when you start seeing the concept of a shtar coming into the picture. And how does the shtar work? What does the shtar say? So by the time of the Alter Rebbe, you start seeing that there are all kinds of problems involving mechiras chametz. Every year, every Rav had all kinds of disasters. And just to clarify, people are still doing the mechira individually themselves. Every year it has to find the guy and then get it right. And because that's the case, so odds are that out of 100 people, out of 1,000 people, a few people are going to mess up. And it starts creating, like Pesach time, that was part of the Rav's headaches. Pesach time was big mechira shaylas. All possible mistakes. So that's when, around the time of the Alter Rebbe, you start seeing this concept starts cropping up of maybe we can centralize the sale through one person. So l'chatchila, it seems to have been just stam a person, stam a yid, and the yid would schlep, he would go from house to house. That was the seder. And there are a number of people who discuss this who point to Dafka. There's a Shail and Shuv of the Alter Rebbe, which seems to be the first reference, the first mention to this Seder, to the system, apparently from around the Tufk of Samachs. So the turn of the century, beginning of the 1800s. So you look in Shail and Shuv of the Alter Rebbe, there's a Shail at the Alter Rebbe. It's apparently from Vielej. And they say in our city, the minig is every year before Pesach. There's a ish echad hamayuchad. His name is Rabbi Yamin. He goes mibayis labayis. He buys all the chametz in the city. This is also key, different. He actually was kaina himself first. He was kaina all the chametz, and then he in turn would sell to the guy. And this was Lafi, the Alter Rebbe's Seder Mechiras Chametz. And he used the Alter Rebbe's nusach. They note that, and then they're Charlotte to the Alter Rebbe. This out of Pesach, there was a Maisa that there were a few Shenkares, people, Shenk, we know, is taverns, so people who ran taverns. They were waiting for the Binyamin, and they see that the clock is ticking down, and he's not coming. So they went to him, and then they come to him. He says, I already took care of this already a while ago, today or a few days ago. So they said, "Can you come with us? We need to sell our chametz. Let's find the guy." And he's not interested. He's finished. He moved on. So the most he's willing to do is that he can make a kinyan with them. He can do, there's two steps. First you transfer it to him, and he transfers it to the guy. So he's not looking for the guy right now, but he transferred it to him. And he told them to go look for the guy. They went, they looked, they couldn't find him. And they came back, and they said, what do we do now? It's mamash the deadline. And they're not even sure at this point if it's before or after the Zman HaIsser. There aren't clocks. And so he said, okay, also, you can sign on to my Shtar Mechira. Weiter, it's all doing the kinyanim with him. But there's no, the guy's not involved. And then there's some who B'chlal didn't sign the Shtar Mechira, they just did a kinyan, and some who didn't do anything. That's the question. We're not getting into what the Alter Rebbe answer, but that's the question. Where apparently, as far as we know, this is the first reference to something like this, where there's one person taking care of it. So as we see, it's still not fully solving the problems, and it's still it's still problematic, still creating issues. But at this point, it's still chiddush. So now we get to the story in Yasi. So in Yasi, there was a Rav. His name was Rav Yosef Landa. Passed away not that much afterwards, in the 1850s. He was actually a descendant of Reb Mendel Bader, who was, to name it, you come across in the first generation of Chassidus. He's mentioned in the back of Derech Mitzvah. So he was a Rav earlier in the city of Litton. Often he gets called the Rav of Litton. And it's told that the Ruzhiner was instrumental in bringing him to Yasi. It's already at this, you start seeing Rebbes arranging who should be a Rav where. So the Ruzhiner brought him to Yasi. So his sefer is Birchas Yosef. So one of his children put out a sefer of his father's life story. He called it Toldos Yosef. And there's general information there about him, and also some about the story that we're about to discuss. So his son explains that there's another Rav in this story, another Rav in the picture. His name is Rav Aaron Moshe Taubes, who also lived around the same time, passed away around the same time. And you know him as the Toyafes of the Aim, the Kain of the Aim, Aaron Moshe, the Aim. He comes from Yuchastik Mishpacha, from the Bach, etc. And both of them had children, Eneklach, Rabbanim, in those areas. So the son, this is what the son says, we get this story. It says, after a few years of Rav Yosef being in Yasi, he started speaking to the Gevirim, and he said, I can't take care of this whole thing myself. Big city, a lot of Yidden. I need another Rav here to help me. So he actually requested that they bring another Rav in. So that's when they took a look at Rav Moshe Taubes, who was a Rav in Snitten in Galicia, Toyafes Re'im. They sent him letters. Even his father sent him a letter that I Maskim B'Lev Shalom, you should come. And Taka and Tafresh Beis, he left where he was, and he came to Yas B'Kavod Gadol. They had Shalom B'Shalva. Until Maisa Satan succeeded, and you have this machlekes about Bechiras Chametz. This is how he writes the story in short, many years later. He says, my father came to Yassi, and he saw how he had these major problems with Bechiras Chametz every year. In a big city like this, everyone was looking for a guy. You can imagine what kind of chaos there might have been. So he made a takana kavua that on every street there should be 2 people named the Torah to buy the chametz from all the people. And they also rented all the places where the chametz was, Hakol Kadas. And then on Erev Pesach, they in turn were massacred these places to the guy. And he was agav the karka. He gets all the chametz in the places, like it says in the Nusach Shtar Mechira. And he says, my father wrote this all up in the pamphlet he printed called Siyag LaTorah. And it's also mentioned in his Birkas Yosef. And he says, Hatakana Nispashta B'Kol Medina. Once my father came up with this, it started catching on and spreading. And so we see here, and we see a lot of people attribute this takana to Rabbi Yosef Land, even though we see the Alter Rebbe and Bielish, they're talking about it earlier, but at least in that part of Eastern Europe, it was Rabbi Yosef Land's idea, Rabbi Yosef Land's takana. So he says, Rabbi Moshe, the other Rav who just arrived, he didn't like this takana, and he printed a Meidah Rabbah against the takana. So things are getting unpleasant. He says, and they kept on printing back and forth, Papulim, Gedolim, Bacharifus, Ubekiyas, and these dinim, and the Gvirim, and the Rosh Shiur, they tried very hard to make Shalom, and it wasn't working. The Machlekes kept on flaring back up, until, he says, in the year Tafrei Shvav, how did they resolve the Machlekes? In the year Tafrei Shvav, the Gvirim said, you know what we need to do? We need to make a shidduch between the 2 Rabbanim. We need to make them a chutanim. I don't know if that's always a recipe for peace, but that was what they came up with. And the author, he's the carbon. He's Adoni Avi and Meiri V'chami. So my father asked the Ruzhiner that the 2 mechatenistas have the same name. They're both Hinda, and that could be an issue. So the Ruzhiner said the shidduch is a good shidduch, and he said that no one calls them Hinda, everyone calls them Rebbetzin, and that's not apparently a problem if they're both called Rebbetzin. And all the Rabbani Yeshiva are not called by their name; they're called Rebbetzin. So therefore, there's no Kpeda, and Ma'ashem Yatza Hadavar, they became Chatanim, and then from then on, the taka was Shalom B'Neim B'Emes B'Tamim. And this was a shidduch when they're kids, and then in Tafresh Tes, so this is 6 years after the Machlekes, when I was already 16. So my father started saying, "No, let's make the chasana," and then he describes a whole other drama over some other issue relating to the ksuva, and upon him it worked out.
They're dead now.
Don't know. So he mentions that his father wrote the Siyag LaTorah, and he mentions that his Shver wrote the Meidah Rabbah. No, we don't have copies of these actual pamphlets anymore. He mentions, though, that they kept on going at each other. He doesn't mention the names. So these we actually do have. So Rabbi Yosef responded with a Mishmeres L'Siyag, defending his Siyag LaTorah, and it includes a Bittul Meidah, being Levatul the Meidah Rabbah. So we have a copy of that. And then the aim, Rabbi Moshe, so he responded with Harisas Mishmeres. So, each one keeps on referencing the previous ones. Now, some of what Rabbi Yosef wrote in Mishmeres L'Siyag is also included, is printed in Birkas Yosef, and some of what Aaron Moshe wrote is included in his Einikal Sefer, the Oidi V'Yishi. Now, after looking through everything that we have, so my conclusion is, we're going to get to the Teichen shortly, my conclusion is that we still don't have any record, as far as I know, of the original Siyag LaTorah to see what the original Takana, the way he wrote it up before anyone attacked him, was. I couldn't find. But the Meidah, even though we don't have a copy of the Meidah, but in the Erev Yishi, the first part in the Erev Yishi is actually essentially the Lashon of the Meidah. We have the whole Mishmeres of Rabbi Yosef defending himself, and you can see that parts of it are in his Birkas Yosef, although I couldn't find all the pieces in the Birkas Yosef in the Mishmeres, but it seems to be from the Mishmeres. It's all responding to the Bar Moshe. And the copy of the Harisas Mishmeres that we have, even though it's damaged and it's missing in like the middle, but from what we have, you can see that the Erev Yishi, even though it's like one long hemshech in the Erev Yishi, but really the first part is the Midah Rabbah, and the second part is portions of the Harisas Mishmeres. But whatever was printed in these Sfarim afterwards is mashmit, all the sharp parts. And it seems like Taka B'Shas Ma'aseh, Taka sounds like it was personal, Taka was unpleasant, but then since the Taka did make shalom later on, so when they wanted to print for the record the actual shittas and Torah, but they didn't include all the parts, and especially the sharp parts. Additionally, another person who got involved, who intervened, was Shlomo Kluger of Brod, very well known. His shuvas on this topic were actually printed during his lifetime by his son. In the end of someone else's sefer, Nois Desha, the son was printing it, so he threw in his father's shuvas, and today it's been printed again by Mechon Chachma Shlomo, that prints Shlomo Kluger's Torah, in the sefer Korban Pesach of Shlomo Kluger. And one more thing before we get into it, there's also a shuvah of the Sher Lemeshiv, the base of Shol Nottensen, Lavav of Lemberg, that also mentions and refers to this controversy. So we're going to go through just the highlights, the relevant portions of everything we just mentioned. And I say the relevant portions because there's a lot of arichis about other inyanim that lav dafka are neged to the way we do it, specifically chulu. But, like I said, the highlights, the relevant portions. Now, since we don't have the siyag, we don't have the original Rabbi Yosef's takana, we don't know how much he even discussed this aspect of it, or whether he just took it to pshitus. But we're going to start with the Meidah that's printed in the first portion of Erev Yishi. So the Einikel, the Rabbi Shraga Dovid Homnick writes that the special kuntris from Isaiah, that he responded to our Mechoten, the Goyen of Litton, which is where Rabbi Yosef previously was, now is still his nickname, where my grandfather showed how it's Taka Aser, and it's been years that I've been looking for a copy of this kuntris, and I couldn't find it, because after it was printed, no one kept a copy. And finally I got a copy, and since everyone else was involved, Shlomo Kluger, and even, I guess, Rabbi Yosef Landa, the Birkas Yosef, parts, or what they had to say, was already printed, so the only one whose opinion is not on the record is my Zayda. They're attacking him, they were disagreeing with him. So I feel mechuyev to put some, this is really my chibur, but I'm Simon Kuf Chafalef and Erev Yishi is going to be Nachas Ruach for Zayda, and I'm very concerned that I might get lost again, and then we'll never find it again. And so this is really the Midah Rabbah, even though he doesn't say that clearly. So it's a tshuva, and it's written tshuva l'chvoid mechutani hagoyin hagadol Rabbi Yosef Landa. So he says b'davar hachadash, this new thing asher nivda milev. So it's very off the bat, not very friendly towards the idea. He made up this new thing to make a mechiras chametz b'mechira kolelas. That's the term he uses. That it's big mechira, that one person buys all the chamutzim in the city, from the shenkers, from the sachrim, etc., and he's going to sell it to a guy. So our Moshe says, I've already announced Badabim that Ein Bo Mamash, and he says, I never heard in any of the places where we have kisses lemishpet, rabbanim, gedolim, lefersamim, that anyone's doing this. So now I'm going to explain why everyone should know that this is not a takana, but a takala. So what's the word? He says, Hadover Yedua, that it's well known that all the kinyanim that we do with mechiras chametz isn't really a kinyan. Ain't by kinyan mamash. Because Medina, The only way you can do a kinyan with a goy is b'kesef and b'mashicha, and that's not what's happening here. Even before this takana, it's staying in your house. So mamela, we have to do other kinyanim to strengthen the mechira, even though each kinyan itself is problematic. But because we have no choice, and the tzerach gadol says Chazal were matter to sell the chametz through the kinyanim that are angenommen, that are accepted. And anyone who knows anything about anything tries as hard as they can to add another kinyan to somehow cover all the chilukei deis. Another thing he says is Galav Yador, we know, is that mechiras chametz is an arma nikeres, harama, and it's obvious that it's harama. And despite that, Chazal says we're mater, and they are concerned that Yidden are going to lose money, and we know a person gets nervous when he's about to lose a lot of money, and if he sees that he's about to lose who knows what, so who knows what he might do, and be over on Pesach. So therefore, the Remekel on this issue as well, due to the loss of money, and he's mitzayin to the Bach. So the Bach here, the Bach is in Siman Taf Mem Ches, which is where it talks about Mechilas Chametz. And the Bach is one of the early ones to mention the new reality of that the Yidden stopped carrying the chametz to the guy's house, and instead they have all this alcohol they're selling, and because of that they're selling it by zich, they're keeping it on their property technically. So the Bach quotes the Tumas Hadeshen. The Tumas Hadeshen is one of the sources that talks about that Mechiras Chametz is fine, but Tumas Hadeshen mentions Michutz Labayis. And the Shulchan Aruch later also says Michutz Labayis. So what's the status of Medina Zu? That Reiv Masa Matan is B'Yayin Saraf and Yash, that's all the business, and it's impossible to get it out of the house, especially if you have an arenda, which is the name for the inn. So
Arenda is a rental.
Okay, but specifically when we speak about an arenda and an arenda, in this context, it refers to an inn, which was leased. Yeah. So he says, Yesh lahatir, that you could sell a taka to the guy, sell him all the chametz in the room, and sell the room itself. He says to sell the room, but they send to it about the shtar. Yes to write a shtar, not to write a shtar. Make a tanai. This and that. Then he mentions about giving the key to the guy, mesiras mafteach. So that was still something you were able to do at that time. You're individually making a deal with the guy. You give him the mafteach. So Bazoi, if otherwise, if the yid is going to go and come and take it back, so then it's like renting, and then it is still in your property, and the seicher will still have to check. So it's not you're not really handing it over. So that was the Bach. The Bach addressed this matzah. That's how the Bach referred to it. So he takes from the Bach, this is Keni Bach, that the Bach is saying this whole thing is a bit iffy, but this is what we have to do. He says in Sefer El Yerabba, it actually says that in Prague, they were matir to sell the yash, but not the shecher. Because there's no shasat chadash. The shasat chak was for the yash. The shecher, you're selling your beer. You don't have to do that. So you see this approach. You see this attitude where if it's harama, it's something that you really shouldn't be doing. It doesn't look right. So if you have no choice, you have no choice. But if you have a choice, don't do it. So he says, it's true that Bismanenu, that now we do a lot of business with Sheikher, so I'm not saying we have to follow the El Yerabba, we also sell Sheikher because it's also the same loss. So the Mitzvah has changed in that respect. But you can see clearly, it's obvious that this is all just not to lose, the Yidden shouldn't lose a large amount of money. So anyone who has a brain, he says, and isn't lacking intelligence can understand that you can make a takana that one yid should near Pesach buy from many people to sell to a guy near Pesach with just the regular kinyanim that we do in the regular shtar mechira because Chazal, it's mishum hefsed b'mayim shel Yisrael. You have your chametz, and what are you going to do with your chametz? You still have it, and the Isser came, and the person who has this pressing problem, he has a heter of hefsed moment. But who was matir for this yid to buy the whole thing through aroma gluya, and he has no tzarech, he has no hefsed, he's just doing schayra b'chemtze shel chaveira, he's been kaina ba'arma, he's selling ba'arma. Chazal never matter this only b'dei chagadol hefsed moment, and after someone who doesn't have hefsed moment, what's pressing you? What's kvetch there? And anyway, they only were matter mechira ba'arma, not kinyan ba'arma. First he has to be kainet, then he has to be mechiret. So the whole thing is against the ratzin and takanas Chazal. This yid apparently often was dafka not the gresta seicher, not the most the biggest seasoned businessman. It was dafka someone who maybe was a schlepper. So the guy who dafka the whole year doesn't do any mischer v'kinyan because he doesn't have anything. And suddenly, before Pesach, he's doing these tremendous deals. He's yifritz mischarel aroiv liknes chametz lemeis lalafim. Suddenly, he's doing tremendous business deals. He's buying up all the chametz in town. And if someone came over to him and said and asked him, "No, you actually you want all this alcohol? You want all this beer? What if the deal doesn't work out? Like, what if the value drops? And what if it doesn't turn out like to be such a great deal in terms of buying all this alcohol? Are you going to pay the money that you owe?" So we'll say, "Kamayni kamaycha yedea." Like I know that I don't have a penny to pay. Am I going to pay min hagaydan, min hayakev? I'm just here to get my tip. I get paid for my tercha, and so there's the Irov and the Adroif, they give some kind of deposit. So I get double, triple of that after Pesach, and that's what he's going to tell you. So how can you even call that a mecha and a kinyan? It's ridiculous. Just for money, he's doing kinyanim that are nonsensical. He says, anyway, about you're supposed to give the key to the guy. But the Yavad, even earlier, in the earlier stages of this, but the Yavad, they said, you don't give the key, maybe it's okay. Also, you're supposed to show the guy the chametz and say, this is what I'm selling, and you're supposed to introduce him to the chametz and show him what you're selling. And you tell him that you could use this for whatever you want, for your purposes. And that's part of how you try to make it as realistic, as real as possible. Now you have this new thing, that the yid is buying and selling it all to the guy. So the guy has no idea what he's buying, and he has no idea where to look for the chametz. He doesn't know where it is. So the guy doesn't really think he's buying anything. It's just, he says, an insult to the honor of Chazal to make this a terim that turn it all into one big joke. And another point he mentions is that these shankers, these people with alcohol, they weren't even shutting down their shank over Pesach. Their business still had to keep going. So they then got a bunch of goyim in their shank to continue selling the chametz on Pesach. And the goyim that are working there, from their perspective, they're getting it from the yid. The yid is telling them, take this, sell this, you have to give me the money when you're finished, etc., etc. So and meanwhile, they're also continuing after they made a kinyan with this yid. The business is still going in their shank. So Mamela, nothing about what's going on in this place suggests and indicates that anything was sold to anybody. So Mamela, there was no mechira keilalas. And all it causes a michshel avim be'isur d'oraisa throughout Pesach and isur d'rabbanan after Pesach, and we no way to fix this. The amount of losses that this is going to cause is going to be meis v'alafim. So stay away. That was his taina. So to that we have the response of Reb Shlomo Kluger. The next stage, the next phase here is Reb Shlomo Kluger. So Reb Shlomo Kluger got involved. Both sides apparently reached out to him. So Reb Shlomo Kluger says that the fight in Yas between the big Rabbanim, I was asked by Rabbi Yosef there to express my opinion, and I see it's machlokes l'shem shemayim. Okay, they're arguing over halacha, mechilas chametz on Pesach, which we know everyone's supposed to sell it in the best way possible. And this Rav Yosef, what he believed is the best way possible is that everyone sells it to the Yid, to one Yid, the best way, and then the Yid sells it all to the guy. So he says Rav Moshe, apparently he was known mainly by the name of Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe Toibus is also there, disagrees, and Yeshua printed their pamphlets, and I got both pamphlets. So he got both the Shraga Torah and the Midar Rama. So he says, even though in this situation I actually do not know this Rabbi Yosef at all, Rabbi Yosef came from somewhere else, and Dafka Rav Moshe Toibus is someone I know. He's from my milieu, and I respect him. He's very important, and I know him since my youth. But I'm not here to just be, ish. I'm not here to be on Rav Moshe's side because he's my friend. I love the MS more than everything. It's like my parents. So after I asked Mechila of Rav Moshe, he's wrong, and this is a minute kasher v'yasher, and they already do this at a number of places in Russia. So as we know, now Teraba, that was already going on in Russia. And in our Medina also, they have done it in a number of places. It's already 6 years that I've already started this in my Kehillah, he says. And with the Rav Moshe's timing, so even though, first of all, I'm going to respond to him point by point. But besides that, I think Rav Moshe is not thinking it through. He's not thinking the hefsid keneged the schar. He says, this Rav Moshe has not yet been in a large Kehillah. And he has not experienced yet the disasters you have every year when everyone tries to write their own Shtar Mechira. And he came to Yas, so the whole thing's new to him. And we see from what it says in Toldus Yosef that he had literally come in the last year. So Itaka just came, so he's seeing the chesroinus. He's only seeing the chesroinus and what this new minik is doing, but he isn't seeing what the problem that it was coming to solve is. And if you would see what happens in big kehillas, how it's impossible to be on top of everyone and make sure that they do it right, you'll see it's atzmu misaper to describe all the problems that happen, as I've seen in my own kehillah. Even though my kehillah dafka, most are b'nei Torah, but still, there's so many problems till I made this takana. So if this Rav would know all of this, he would, to understand the meta factors in the situation, he would also have maybe a different maskana Torah-wise, and he would know it's better to choose harab mi'utai, better to choose the lesser evil. And even if it's problematic, but better to follow that than so. That's first of all. Because anyway, it's a good minik. That would be if it's terrible, but it's not even terrible. It's great. It says, and the interesting thing, and this gets quoted afterwards. He says, I think this minik has a remez in Gemara. It says lekamidi delayna mizah b'yiraisa. Because in Gemara Pesachim and Afyud Gimel, there's a machlekes over there about the Mishnah is talking about when is Seif Zman Achilas Chametz, whether it's the Shah Ravius or the Shah Chamishis. So the Gemara wants to bring a raya that a Yid can't have it during the Shah Chamishis. So it says Rovin Bar Avada said Ma'isa ba'adam echad, that someone gave a pikadon of a big sack full of chametz to Yochanan Chakika. Yochanan Chakika stars in the Masechtas Pesachim. He's there in the beginning. For those who remember, he's here in the story as well. So he had this pikadon of chametz, and then mice came and made holes, and the chametz was sticking out. And he wasn't sure whether it's better for the Baal pikadon to keep it or to maybe sell it. If you sell it, at least you cut your losses, and that's that. So he came to Rebbe, and it was already out of Pesach, first hour, the second hour, the third hour. Rebbe keeps on telling him, don't sell it. Because maybe the Balabas will still come back, and he'll be happy to take his own chametz and finish it off himself. Came the fifth hour, the Balabas is not showing, so he said, go sell it. So the Gemara says, my love, lenachrim, you should sell it to Goyim, the Goyim should eat it. Rabbi Yehuda, and why is he saying why if it's taka to goyim, why is he saying it? Why is he saying sell it to goyim? Because we all like Rabbi Yehuda, that the Shah Chamishis, a Yid can't have it anymore. So says maybe he meant to sell it to a Yid, and we all like Rameir. So by said Rebazoi, if you could just sell it to a Yid during the fifth hour, why sell it? Let him sell it to himself. Nishkele l'nafshe. He can eat it and then put the money down. Why does he have to go to the shuk and sell it to other people? Rashi says, Nishkele l'nafshe, V'yechlenu v'yitin dam of l'bayim. Let him eat it and let him pay the bayim. So Shlomo Klugataina is that what's Rashi adding over here? Obviously, if you gave it to another yid, he would also eat it and give the money to the bayim. So what's the word over here that yechlenu v'yitin dam of l'bayim? So he wants to say to Shlomo Kluger and his style of learning that nida. That Rashi svirale that gam is my name that one yid bought all the chametz and he sold it to a guy, and the guy would keep it till after Pesach, and therefore when he says no the yid, so Rashi has to say if you're giving it to the yid, then the yid has to eat it. One second. That's how he fits it into that. If you sold it to another yid, then that yid would be selling it to a guy. And the Gemara is saying, why do that? Let him just take it himself and let him eat it. So Dafka in this file, he's talking eating it and giving the money to the Bailam. But when the Gemara had said earlier that to sell it to another yid, in that case it meant the yid is going to sell it to a guy. That's how he wants to fit it into the Gemara. He himself says it's just a remes, not mukhrach at all, but fine. So anyway, that was all, and he goes on and on about that. He says, Paul says, back to the actual thing. So he says, he takes on Ramesh's Tainus. So what are Ramesh's Tainus? Ramesh's Tainus that this chiluk ideas, you have to be careful with all the kinyanim. So he says, I don't know why you bring that up. I sort of Yosef's takana, and he also has all the kinyanim. So I'm saying, what's your point about the kinyanim? And you're going to say, what if you make a mistake? If everyone's doing it themselves, it's much more likely to make a mistake, to skip something or to add something that makes it worse. Mashenk, when you have one person, you can be mashgiach and get it right, but you can't control the rabbim. Also, if it's the same person, he'll remember from year to year exactly what to do, because this is his asek. Mashenke and a yachid, every year you forget and you wake up every Pesach. What do I have to do again? And he says, this is something obvious, no one can deny this. So Mamela, this is dafka the way to correct any mistakes. He says, when everyone sells to themselves, sometimes they forget to sign an Erev Pesach, because it's a very busy time. Sometimes they forget to give the shtar mechira till after chatzos, and there's no one to remind them. And I've seen this all happen myself. Mashenka, when you have one guy, so it's his job. He's on top of it. He says, Ramesh also said that everyone knows that mechiras chametz is an arma, and so that's dafka if you have a hefsed moment that's pressing you, but who was matter to this other yid who doesn't have any hefsed moment to get involved and do all his arma. So he says, Bezani Yoimer, Moshe Shapir Komar, Derech Tmiya, unlike in Gemara. So he says, believe me, if I didn't see his signature, or Moshe's signature on this, I wouldn't believe that he even would make such an argument. Says, first of all, is this, you're telling me that if I sell it personally, then it's for hefsed moment. But if it's through this guy, where's the hefsed moment? Why do you think this guy is in the picture? Why do you think this guy is buying my chametz in order to sell it? It's the same hefsed moment. And specifically the chash that the person, individuals won't sell it properly, and then they'll be over in Bal Yirah, and they'll have the hefsed moment. So we're trying to save them from the real hefsed moment of them trying to sell it and failing. So to save them from that, that's why he's taking it from them and selling it in turn. So it's the same heter mechiras chametz. It's of course serving the same exact purpose. This middle guy is also earning a little bit, and why do we care? Why he should dafka work for free? Even a Meshav Aveda is allowed to take money, or Malamdi Tanaikas. But the Iker, Kinyan, Mechira, all the transactions that are happening here are all to help Yidden. He says, and also, Bishlama, no, fine. So, he says, Nachtetzu. What's also Tamua is that if you're claiming that we're all just doing this now for this kaina, it's all for this kaina. So Taka, what's this doing for him? Mela, the Bailam would have the chametz be'emes. So you can be concerned that it's not an arma, that it's an arma that they don't really mean to sell it because it's Taka your chametz. You don't really want to part with your chametz. So when you sell it to a guy, that looks like an arma. So Mela, you have this fact that on the one hand, it looks like arma. On the one hand, you're keeping it, you want it, and you want to have it in the minute after Pesach. So have some moment, so we let you sell it. But this shliach, the koine, miman avshach. If it's ba'arma, so it's not his chametz b'chlal, so what's he doing? So Mamela, we go back to the Bailam, back to the Hafsid Merubah of the Bailam, and the shliach didn't do anything. And if it is mechira ba'arama is a mechira, so then his mechira to the guy is also mechira. So I don't see the problem here. Shlomo Kluger says. And he says, you also tie, this guy doesn't do business the whole year, and suddenly before Pesach, he's buying hundreds of thousands, and you ask him, and he'll tell you, I'm not doing any real deals here. This Rav, did he never see a shtar mechiras chametz before? What do you think we do in a regular shtar mechiras chametz? Same thing. You take a guy off the street, says, Anochri, Artiloi, Karua, Ubaloi, a guy who's also not doing any deals, and you start selling alafim and levavas chametz to him. No? So he says, either he never saw shtar mechiras chametz, or this Rav doesn't know how to speak Polish. Because if he knew, and he would find a guy, and he would ask the guy, you're going to pay for the chametz? Yeah, this is you're planning on paying up the whole thing. And let us know what response he gets from the Nachri Artuloi. So why does this? Why he's making this sound absurd? Why is this any worse than selling it to the guy? And if that's a kinyan, then this is a kinyan. And in a chanami, you want to say that's why it looks like arma. I understand, but this famous Tvuas Shar, the Tvuas Shar says that it's taka arma, but we accept it. So Mamela, if it works for a guy, it works for you. What about the key? So he says, "Shvil davar nachin, but litchas davar nachin." It's true; it would be very good to give the key, but because that's a good thing, so therefore you're going to get rid of this good thing. He keeps on emphasizing we're saving people here from chash, keeping the chametz in your house and saving them from hafsed mammon. So, do you rather be concerned about that, or do you rather be concerned that you didn't show it to the guy in the best way possible? Be concerned about the main thing. So, showing the guy or giving him the key, yeah, but it's good to give the key. But you yourself said that the place already said that b'diavad you don't have to give a key. No, kol shas adchak is k'diavad, and we don't have any greater shas adchak. We can't have everyone selling on their own. Shkiyas miyav, and it's going to be much worse. So even if you think that part is b'diavad, no. He says, and anyway, that's just your point, but l'chatchila in this case, you don't need a key. Why do you need a key? You need a key so that it shouldn't look like it's haram or lahadja. It looks very obvious that like it's haram if you don't give a key. So if you have a key, you bring the guy to your house or whatever, and you sell him the chametz, and then you usher him out of the house, and you don't give him a key, that looks like a lot more of a harama. Now, even though every mechiras chametz is in essence a harama, because ultimately it always reverses, but the question is how obvious it is. So generally, the reason why it's somewhat obvious is because this guy clearly doesn't have what it takes to actually do the deal. But it's otherwise, how else would you tell that this is not a straight, deal on the up and up? Mashenkin, if you have mafteach and you don't give it to him, then it's a harama nikam mitoichin. So therefore, if you have a key and you don't give it, then it looks bad. But if let's say you don't have a key because you lost it, so you're not allowed to sell your chametz that year? No, you're still allowed to sell the chametz. So when the yid sells to another yid, so then you don't have to be makbid with mesidas mafteach, because it's like a normal sale. A normal sale, we're not makbid on mesidas mafteach dafka. So when you sell from one yid to another, it looks more like a normal sale. And not giving the key does not look like haram nikam mitoichai, because what's the aroma here? It's just a yid selling to another yid. When a yid sells to a guy before Pesach, that looks like, oh, it's chametz. But here, technically, it's just a yid selling to another yid. Who knows what's going on over here? So the aroma is not nicker. So there's no need to give a key because nothing looks suspicious over here. So Yidafka, in this case, wouldn't need to give a key. Goes through some more, and then he says what you wrote at the end, that the idea that they're still doing business in their shank afterwards, after they between the sale and Pesach and on Pesach, what's going on over here? So he says, Achar Machila, you didn't look at the nusach of the shtar of Rav Yosef, because it said clearly in the shtar that there'll be some kind of arrangement like this, that even though the koine is being koine of the chametz, but the meicher gets to keep the profits of the sales. He wrote that into the shtar. So you're telling me that they took the chametz and they gave it to the goyish barkeeps, and it's all fine. It's all there in the shtar. And whatever sales they're doing is the shlichus of the lekeach. And if it's sold to the guy, it's the shlichus of the guy. And how the shlichus with goyim works, but it's fine. Seif davar, it's a great takana, it's wonderful, and Moshe is saying that it's chametz sha'al v'pesach, like he ended off, we're going to have big, he's mamish, like talking to him, it's like it's real, like, they're about to lose all their money because what they did was wrong. It's not true, it's not chametz sha'al v'pesach. Man yorvlam is shufri v'achelna. It's great. It's wonderful. The chametz, it's mahadrin, and no problem. And again, goes through some more, and he says again, this is all the pull of ba'alma, but the Dina already said the minig is kosher v'yasher, and Kurt, establish it. This should be the way to do it. Many yiru v'chen yasu and all the kehillas. And of course, all the chametz and all the money of this year, it's all mutter ba'achila, man yavlam is shufri, yoysa shalom v'mreima, v'yasa shalom v'neim, and between all Talmidei Chachamim, and he signs his name. And the Mechayin Chachma Shloimeh that printed this again in Karam Pesach, they have all of Reb Shlomo Kluger's notebooks. And they say this is in the Ksav Yad and Chaim that started in the year Tafresh Aleph. So it's from around that Kufa, and this apparently was from Tafresh Gimel. So this was printed also in the back of Nois Dasha, like I mentioned earlier. His son Bechayav printed this in the back of a different sefer Nois Dasha. Now we look at the Mishmeres Lasyog, Rav Yosef, who's also defending himself and responding to Rav Aaron Moshe. So at the end of the Mishmeres, the beginning of the Mishmeres Lasyog is more Barichas and other Nyanim, and then there's the Bittul Meidah at the end, where he's taking on the Meidah Rabba of Rav Moshe directly, and B'Shura Aleph, what you wrote, B'Shura Bez, what you wrote. So he says, B'Shura Aleph, you wrote, it's a Davar Chodash Asher Nivda Milev. We just made this up. He says, I'll have you know that the Takana was already mentioned in the Sefer Yeshuas Yaakov from Harav HaGoyen HaGadol Lvov, Yaakov Arenstein of Lvov, and Simon Tafem Ches. He wrote that this is the way to do it. So don't say that I made something up. And he says in the second and third line, you wrote that you didn't hear in any of the places where you have Chashav Rabbanim that any of them are doing it. He says, well, I can tell you that there are two Rabbanim that I can tell you that are already doing it. One is Harav Tzaddik HaGoyen Mevolachisk. Looked it up a little bit. Apparently, it was also like a Talmud of the Maggid. There's a lot of Chassidish aspects here to this whole situation. So he was, his name is Reb Leibush, Talmud of the Maggid. He ended up in Yassi himself. He was in Yassi apparently before them. And Harav HaGoyen, the Lamed Beis Shin, I didn't have a chance to look it up. I assume it's the Levushei Srod. So already in their areas, they've been doing it. According to Spashat Hamidigum, Kaimis Agdoilim, Dinas Poilin, Litta, Badaisen, and even in our Medina as well. So, like Shlomo Kluger, he's saying it's Pasha not true to say that I'm actually the inventor of this takana. It's been spreading. I'm my takana in this particular area, maybe, but specific way of doing it, but it's been already widespread. But again, the taina that they have goyim selling it in the shank. So also he responds that this is the deal, that the yid or the Yisraelim, like it says in the Sefer Toldot Yosef, really there were multiple, like he said, each block had its yidden that bought it from the block. So they gave it a shus that he can sell chametz till ad kodim zmani surai al cheshbon hakainim. So if your issue is that during that intermediate time they're still selling it, no, we worked it out. It's all part of the cheshbon, and he quotes Shlomo Kluger already. He already has Shlomo Kluger's response, and he's saying that Shlomo Kluger said it's fine. And whatever happened on Pesach, it's weiter. It belongs to the guy on Pesach. When you said Taka that chametz after Pesach is aser b'hana, we already explained that it's absolutely not aser b'hana. It's fine. And weiter, he keeps quoting Shlomo Kluger a lot because he knows that Shlomo Kluger is a good name to quote. So when you're saying that that my takana did not do anything to save anyone from an isser, so he says the shum tachbula. He says, well, I'm not trying to do a tachbula. I'm trying to do a mitzvah, and Shlomo Kluger said it's great. And so he concludes that what I set up here is absolutely fine and great, and the Bismadar Rabba, it's not okay. What he's trying to taina. And he quotes Shlomo Kluger. So he says, I'm letting you know that from now on, this is my last thing I'm going to put on the record and print. This is my last publication on the topic, even if he continues going, because if my opponent here was being honest, then he would do it differently. It would be nicer. And I see that he's just going on and on and on. It's going to be endless. So I have a lot more to say, but I'm leaving it at this. And it's signed at the end, Chaf Hei L'Chodesh Ziv. So they're fighting about it after Pesach. The year is Takana Gedola Leprat Cotton. Takana Gedola, I didn't add it up, but apparently it's Tafresh Gimel. He signs his name, Yosef, Menachem Mendel of Yas, Nitpas B'Yas, Ayidei, Moshe Zelig Cement, and not Wasserman. And then we have the Harisas Mishmaris. So the Harisas Mishmaris is Rav Moshe responding again back to him. So he says, okay, you responded and you told me that this is also printed in the Erev Yishi, towards the end of the Erev Yishi. You tained, I said that it was made up, and you said it's not made up, it's in the Yeshua's Yaakov. He says, you know what, fine, you're right. The source of it is in Yeshua's Yaakov, but ein l'meid halacha, le'im pi limud, le'im pi ma'isa, ad she'em halacha l'ma'isa. He says, I don't think this guy in Lavav ever did this himself. There we see that he's not really maskim to this Semitic. And if you look in the Sefer, you'll see that he really had a lot more to say on the topic, and it's not in the Sefer though. He says, Mi Kamaini, this Rav Moshe Taibas, he was actually a Talmud of the Yeshua's Yaakov himself. He says, Mi Kamaini was close to this guy. Day after day, Kamat, we would talk and learning, and I never heard about this from him myself. If he liked it, if he thought it was a good idea, surely he would have discussed it with me. And he says, you taina that all these other places are doing it. So he says, first of all, I never heard this. I'm around. I didn't hear that anyone's doing this. Even if you say that they did it, no, fine, I'm not impressed. So he does concede a little bit. And he says, Adrabah, the guy in Tzaddik, Nevolachizk, was a Rav here in Yassi before us, and his son after him. Looked it up. I think his son was Rabbi Yosef. And yet, we've not been doing this in Yassi until you came along. You're telling me the guy in Nevolachizk has been doing it, and yet he came here, and you can ask anyone in our city, and we haven't been doing it since he's been here. So, what does that mean? And he said, he over here, in his Bittul Meidah, he mentioned at one point that Lahar, Shlomo Kluger found that Remez in Shas. We discussed it earlier. He brought it to out of the Rashi and the Daf Yud Gimel. But he didn't say what the remez was, the Rabbi Yosef in his Bittul Meidah. He just said, the Shlomo Kluger told me there's an remez in Shas. So he says, but you wrote, B'Shem, Agoyim Shlomo Kluger, there's an remez in Shas. So you're just pointing, and you're not saying what the remez is. And he says, Tehil Lakel, if it was actually an off in the Gemara, I would know about it. Don't tell me there's an remez in Shas. If it was there, I would know. And not only I would know, but the previous generations would know, and they would have all made the stakana already. And since no one ever heard of this, so about the remez is nicht kein remez. Kitzer, he's not backing down. He's still tining the same thing. It's an arma. You can't go and do an overt, glaring arma like this. Only for hefsed mammon. Not to mechira keilelas. That particular aspect, he's just not budging at all. And when you said that you don't need a mesiras mafteach, you're wrong. You do need a mesiras mafteach. He's not backing down on that either. And you said that it's not so important to show him every place where the chametz is. It's not true. You're supposed to show him where the chametz is, and he even quotes the Alter Rebbe over here. There's also, earlier in the back and forth, there's also actually back and forth over the Art of Kabbalah, where apparently Rabbi Yosef had included the Art of Kabbalah in his Seder. And Rabbi Moshe, in the course of saying the opposite of everything Rabbi Yosef did, so he also starts up with the Art of Kabbalah and says that he's not so sure it's such a great idea. But we're not getting into the whole Art of Kabbalah thing. And so the Hamshech of Shlomo Kluger that was printed, so we have what he wrote later on after he saw Ramesh's response to Arisas Mishmeres. So Shlomo Kluger writes, Amar HaKaisev, Hashem knows, and I wrote this shuvah to Yas, and again, this debate. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I really just loved the truth and wanted to defend Rabbi Yosef and to mekayim the minhag that big kahilus are doing without anyone being meicha. And I thought by writing what I wrote, it would calm things down. And Rav Moshe would be makabel the emes. And when I actually got a personal letter from Rav Moshe during this whole episode, I wrote him Divrei Shalom u'Musar. I was writing to him nicely, but telling him to calm down. But now I see that he just wants machlekes, so the counter, and to attack me as well. He sent me the Harisas Mishmeres that he printed. He said, you know what that was? V'hifsidli harbe demei habei dayer. I had to pay. Apparently, the recipient had to pay the post bill. I wasted my money on his kuntras, and he didn't write anything personally back to me. He didn't respond to my letter. Just sent me this kuntras, and that seems like he's just trying to offend me. And these papers are worthless, and you could see that he's got a lot more shayfer towards Rav Moshe now. And I'm not even going to bother responding to him because this can go endless, and who's going to say who's right between us anyway? So I'm going to print his michtav. I don't know where and if it was actually printed, but you'll see his letter, and you'll see that it's just kavod atzmai, not kavod shemayim, because I'm just trying to help, and he's getting all offended. It's one thing I want to respond to. He said, Rav Yosef wrote in my name that I have a remez in Shas to the Mechira, which we saw already in Rav Shlomo Kluger's letter. And Rav Moshe wrote that if the remez was in Shas, then he should know about it. So he says he thinks he knows Kol Talumos v'Ramazei Hashas. So he says, let me say what I think. He says, Nehidin le shvile Hashas k'shvile dinaharda v'dal. Just like he knows the shvile dinaharda, he knows the shvile Hashas. So that's his comeback at Rav Moshe, and not claiming that I know Shas. My Zaydus didn't know Shas that way. I don't know why he seems to think that he should know everything in Shas. Maybe his Zaydus, but anyway, it's just a remez, whatever. So anyway, the idea that someone else can get involved in your haram, he says, Be'etzim is an often a Mishnah. In Meiser Sheni, in Perek Daled, Mishnah Daled, it says, Keitz Marimen on Meiser Sheni, you don't want to pay the Chaimesh, so you ask someone else to be paid it for you. So you see the idea that you can do harama involving another party. So your whole taina, that why is someone else getting involved? You see, that's fine. And it's not even to save you from an isser, just to save the chaimish. And right, he says, you keep on saying you never heard of this. He says, different mechutin. Shehu ba'atzmei siprloi shekiyim aminig bekilas tarnapol limker chametz lahabeistin ve'ir al masharot limker laharaf shisham. You already heard about it. Don't say you never heard about it. You know for sure that someone you know told you that it's already something that's come up before. He concludes and he says, I'm confident that it's a good takana, and if the people of Yas are gonna listen or not, it doesn't matter. Other places, they're gonna do the right thing. He says, I'm starting to wonder whether the people in Yas are sitting on Mei Menuchos. Things must be really calm and peaceful in Yas if this is all you have to do to fight with each other. He says, well, I am very busy. So, Mamela, I'm just telling you that it was all tzara emes, not kind of a sinna, and I hope you folks work it out. But interestingly, many years later, like 15 years later, Shlomo Kluger actually backtracked a little bit, which is interesting. So he writes later, and it's printed also, Behemshech Echad, in the Eidi B'Yishi, and all these time, one after the next. So even though I wrote in this tshuva to Mekayim to sell it all to one, and that was all the fisha to Mekayim of Yosef's words, because he's talking very chashuv, he was mashkiach. But the way this thing was working in other places was weiter. You had Yidden that were going from house to house, and all they cared was about the money, and they weren't doing it right either. So you're not solving anything. So it doesn't seem to have a problem with the Etzim thing. Just the way it was being implemented in Poland, where he was, it was not actually solving any problems. It was just creating or recreating the same problems. So, Mamela, better in that case to do it yourself. And if you're not a Talmud Chacham, show it to a Talmud Chacham to make sure it's right. So that was what Shlomo Kluger actually ended up saying after a while. We also have the Shiur L'Meishiv. Try to keep it short. Shiur L'Meishiv is known for having a lot of tightness against selling the chametz through one person through this. So Shiur L'Meishiv is really the one that has like the ikar tightness, and then you have the stei chametz in Merachas Chametz U'Matzah cites some all the achreinim that came afterwards, because ultimately this was actually the last protest. The Shiur L'Meishiv is maybe the last one to have an issue with it, and then everyone talks about how it was angenommen and all the achreinim. And they try to find for these kashas. So, for example, the Shiur L'Meishiv wants to taina that when it comes to harsha, the whole harsha is through a signature, and we don't have edim that can be mekayim the chasima. And the Taz and the Magen Avraham say you have to give him mafteach, otherwise it's haram gemura. And there's a disconnect over here. The lekeach doesn't know who the meicher is. All the guy knows that he owns something somewhere. And he says that be'ames for hayal eilamim the shnei gedolei hadar nechleku harabanim miyas Rav Moshe Tabish and Rabbi Yosef Landau. And it's already mentioned the Shulchan Aruch V'Agorim Maharaz Baal Tanya. He means the tshuva that also mentions this idea. But he says over there, Machru Kol HaChametz LiYehudim HaYedim Eich Lichtev. At least over there, they did the shtar right. So he's acknowledging that if you do the shtar right, they wrote each mecher and all the pratim, etc. So then you don't have all these problems that I just said. And that's what the Yeshua's Yaakov, the original source, was talking about. And he says, even then, just Moshe Toibus had a problem with it. And even though in that case the Beis Din supported Rabbi Yosef, another Rav saying, I defended Rabbi Yosef at the time of the fight, but the Kahai Gavna, not just through Harsha, and he's just a Shliach, but there are a lot more involved, not just writing it on a paper or whatever. So those are his times. So Stei Chametz The Stei Chametz says, look, we're all doing this. We're all selling it through our shah. It's Pasha B'Tfutzis Yisrael, so Chas V'Shalom to say that we're all doing it wrong, so he's going to have to go through all the tainas. He says, you're tining that the mashal the star is up, it's not quite such a stark star. There's no Eidim Mesira or whatever, there's no Eidos on the Chasima. There's no, so Mela, the star itself, what is the star? So he said that the Stei Chametz quotes the Big Dayesha. The Big Dayesha says that if the Meshaleach is not makchish, that he made a shliach, then shluchi kamoiso, it's like the Meshaleach is signed. So you only have an issue with Eidim, and it's not if there's a disagreement, a controversy. But over here, everyone is masking, and he's acting in his place. The Mafteach, what about the Mafteach? So the Big Dayesha says that even though the Bach and the Taz said that you can't lock the chametz because it looks like harama, that's when the guy paid for everything. And then you lock it looks like harama. But after when the guy only pays to make kadima and the rest is a milva, so then it's not harama to lock it up because you weren't paid in full yet. So it's okay to lock it and say, look, until you pay me, I'm not letting you just come and take it. Another taina the Shalom Eshev had was that we don't even know if the guy got a shava pruta for each macher. Whatever they're giving the guy, the amount of chametz that he's getting, the amount of sales, lav dafka is even a shava pruta. So the Stei Chametz says that he brings from a sefer that Chalkas Yoyev says that the whole din you need a shava pruta is dafk for each individual is dafka by kiddushin and not by mechira. If a person is mekadosh shtei nashim, he needs to be mekadosh each one individually with their own pruta. Mash'enkin the mechira, if you buy 2 cows, so whatever you're buying, it's one. You buy with 1 pruta. The kahena, I don't want to keep you anymore. I just want to conclude that b'poel we see the thing Quran, and we see that Tzemach Tzedek is one of the Makaidas that they're mitzayin to, who mentions this thing, the Pshitos in Eirach Chaim, Simon Vav, and Zayim Ches. So, for example, in Simon Vav, the Tzemach Tzedek says a city that makes the matz, a shliach, to sell their chametz, and they say he's selling all the chametz, even the chametz that comes to their rishus after they went to the Rav, even the chametz that they get in the interim till Erev Pesach, he's selling as well. And they give him a shtar shlichus 2 or 3 days before Pesach. And then people are giving each other matanas of chametz in between. So is it included in the mechiras of the matz or not? Because the mamash didn't have it when they gave the ksav shlichus. So he talks about this question. And one of the approaches that Tzemach Tzedek has over there is that even if you can't call it a shlichus, you can't make a shliach for something that is in the future. But because you were megali or das, you indicated that you wanted to be your shliach. So even if the shlichus doesn't really work, but he can do it else as chus to mezaka. He shouldn't lose his chametz. He shouldn't be even by a rabbi matzah. Even if it's not shlichus, it's mitzad zechiyah. Other cases might be different. Moshe Gerushin could be a chayiv. It's different, but he says mechiras chametz is a schus labal chametz. So when he made the shliach, when he made the matzah shliach, even if it's not a shlichus gemura, but mitzad zechiyah, he's able to mitzad that it's a schus huloi. He's able to be a shliach to sell everything. But l'Rav Chadamilsa better to write in the shtar shlichus that he's making him a shliach also for the chametz that's going to come afterwards, and he'll be a shliach and be a schus and say it both ways, and it should be fine. But the way the Tzemach Tzedek is describing it is already a lot closer to the way, or mamash like the way we do it, in the sense that, first of all, it's the Rav, the idea that it's the Rav of the city, and not just Rabbi Yamin going from house to house, or different people on different blocks, and going from you go to the Rav, and you're not selling it to the Rav. Right? Tzemach Tzedek said very clearly that it's a shtar harsha, or Moshe seemed to be very bothered about the selling it, and the selling it is haram. Here it's harsha. And people point out that the Rebbeim actually continued doing it the old way, the different way. The Rebbeim actually continued selling it to the Rav, and the Rav would then sell it to the guy. And there's some people that also want to do like the Rebbeim, but it depends on the Rav. There's a word from Zalman Shimon that Zalman Shimon said, I don't mind being the Rebbe's guy, but not your guy. You're selling the chametz to me. I'm a guy. For the Rebbe, I'll do it, not for you. But could be other Rabbanim are willing to do it. And that's all just a taste of the big topic.